Yes, of course you are. Who isn't? But there's a solution. Let's talk about it with Kimberly Anne Iverson on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, thanks for taking time out of a busy schedule to spend it with you. We will not disappoint. I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Our executive producer is here. He writes these things and made me say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Some people have odd number of kids. He has a number of odd kids.
That's how we raise them. Proud.
And our producer, Jinx, is in the little glass booth. Jinx, happy National Bacon Day.
And also with you.
Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. They haven't yet thought up a computer problem that John can't fix. But we keep trying. Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. When he was younger, George was very anxious. But things have changed now. He's old and anxious. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminine side of the program. Kathy says muffins are just the socially acceptable way of eating cake for breakfast.
There you go.
There you go. Hey, listen, we have a great gift for this program. One of my favorite people. Her name is Kimberly, and Kimberly I've known for a whole lot of years. I've known her husband for more, and his grandfather and great-grandfather. It's a legacy you wouldn't believe, and we would go into it, but that's not what this program is about. Kimberly and Danny have been church planting as inner-city missionaries for 20 years. They can get to heaven without grace. Nobody will even mention Jesus. And then if anybody mentions they have 9 children, the angels will say to Kimberly and to Danny, you poor dears, you come on in. They also work in community development, astounding success, not-for-profit work, and children's discipleship. Kimberly's the mother of 9 children, and she just told us she has 2 more on the way. And I ask if she knows what's causing this.
Was it an Amazon flash sale?
Yeah, right.
Epidemic in their house.
Kimberly has a great book, and I've known this for a long time. She has an amazing gift of clarity and of writing. And the book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is called Memoir from the Manic Years, Discovering Humility as the Antidote to Anxiety. So after this program, if you're anxious and worried about anything, Kimberly, who's been there and done that and has at least 9, coming 11 T-shirts to prove it. And we're going to discover some things that'll make all the difference in the world. Kimberly, you didn't write this book easy. You paid a price for it. And did you just finally come to the end? And we're going to talk about Murray and the ideas and why you think he's so great. But and maybe even his wife. Her name was Anne?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Anne Murray.
All right. Where did the idea come when you quit being anxious, or when you were so anxious and you said, I got to find some answers?
Yeah, I was completely unraveling after having my 8th kid and being in the middle of full-time ministry. And Danny, my awesome husband, let me get away to a cabin, and I started listening to this book Humility by Andrew Murray. And it was the exact answer to prayer that I needed in the midst of all that anxious turmoil inside of me, trying to hold everything together and keep everything going. And I think the biggest thing that hit me first was the principle that God is the creator. And if he's the creator, I'm just a creature. And he was sustaining the whole world before I ever entered the scene. And so I'm actually not the one sustaining my whole family's life, my kids' nutrition, their health, their staying alive, all that I was trying to manically keep together. God was on his throne doing it over me. And once I realized you are so big and I'm so little, freedom started for me.
Oh, that is so good. You know, most of us, and I do still, build my life around my life. It's about me. It's about the worries and the anxiety that I have. And God taught you, and you wouldn't put it this way, quid in furorem. That's Latin for what the hell? And once you looked at the God who really exists, who was big, it made all the difference in the world. You would think it would be just the opposite. I mean, don't most people try to get over their anxiety by being bigger, not smaller? Explain that to us.
Yeah. So when I would get into a position of beholding how big God was, and it literally came in the form of me getting on my face in the mornings, like that's the lowest position I could put my physical body into to get my mind in that place. And I would just look at him sustaining everything and him loving my children more than I could or ever would, and him doing everything ahead of me. It empowered me to be able to get up again, face whatever new kid trauma I was about to deal with, and know that he was walking with me in it. And you know, Jesus's life was the model of this. You go lower, and it leads to resurrection. And God says he lifts up the humble. And so the lower I could go, trusting more in him and less in me, the more I could see him show up. And it was more like me getting out of the way and him coming and having his rightful place in the nitty-gritty of my life.
Oh, that's so good. It's never totally settled, though, is it? I mean, that's a vision you have to go back to again and again. Is that right?
Yeah, that's why I wrote the book. It started in a little composition book, The Principles of the Humility, from the book, Andrew Murray's book. And I would write out how it could pulse into my daily life. And it was really like the student getting the lessons and taking notes. And the book that I produced is the student rewriting the notes to remind myself of these principles that we will never conquer or overcome until we behold Jesus face to face.
Oh, that's so good. I think most writers, if they admit it, write for themselves and nobody else. You know, you sit down and you put on paper what you need to hear over and over again. And by the time it goes through uptight editors and changes and all kinds of reversals, you got it until the next time you're anxious and you have to do it all over again.
Or until you get pregnant with twins. Yeah. that would be a case.
That's probably not going to be an option for you, Steve.
Yeah, I'm not going to have that problem. They said it couldn't be done, but I did it.
Yeah, it's a whole new world now. Yeah, it might work.
You know, we're laughing about having so many children and more on the way, and that's a point of anxiety, and I get that. But what you guys do on a day-to-day basis, there's so much disappointment, so many surprises, so many things that happen in the inner city in a down and out place that, it's not just kids, is it? It's what Jesus has asked you to do in other places also.
Yeah, it's required a lot of opening our home to a lot of people. Like we currently have 4 extra people living with us on top of the 11 in our family. You can imagine the laundry situation in my house.
Wow.
You know, Kimberly, that this is a cause for divorce. You keep saying in your book, it's not just Danny, it's my sweet husband, Danny. On occasion, you might reconsider that and say, give me at least one room where I can go and be still and think about how little I am. Guys, you don't want to miss any of this. Kimberly Iverson is one of the most real and authentic people that you're ever going to meet. In fact, during this hour, you're going to see the real lady talking about real things in real ways. And that's what her book does. It's not a fix-all direction for entire sanctification. It's a process whereby God says, be still, remember, and be glad. Memoir from the Manic years, discovering humility as an antidote to fear. Don't go anywhere. Have a place at our table. We're talking to Kimberly Anne Iverson, and her new book is an amazing book and an extremely helpful book. Memoir from the Manic years, discovering humility as the antidote to anxiety.
Okay, Kimberly, we were talking off the air. I want to get just the average everyday stuff out of the way first. I'm one person in a house. I do 2 loads of laundry a week. You are 11 people, and you have 4 additional people that live with you, and you're going to bring in 2 more. No matter how you add that up, that's 15 people. You have to have more than one washing machine and dryer. And if you don't, then we need to take up a collection, because I can't even imagine. I can't imagine the volume of laundry.
Have the
In
kids.
fact, how do you have an hour to sit and talk with us? Because it's piling up while
Maybe
you're
she just
talking to
throws
us.
it away.
Yeah, right. You start all over again with new clothes instead of washing the old
Have
ones.
the kids put on all their clothes and jump in the lake with
Exactly.
soap in their pocket.
Get the spin cycle
So
going,
you
guys.
don't have 2 yet, but you're working on it, right?
Yes, I'm 12 weeks pregnant. But in terms of the laundry, I've trained all of my kids they have a day of the week that they get to do their laundry. Usually they're doubled up on days, and they have to get their laundry done on that day. And by the time they're 6 or 7, they're doing their own laundry.
All right. Okay.
That is
Definitely
so
gotta
good.
write that book.
explains
Yeah,
it.
that's the book I want.
Yeah.
Forget the spiritual stuff.
That's great. And I have heard that from other people who have had multiple children, that they begin the process of just the tangible stuff that has to be done just to keep life functioning at a pretty early age. I also thought, having not for a lot of years, but having been a former school teacher and having a friend who only has 4 children, the idea that at least when they go to school, you have some free time. So how many are we homeschooling at this point, and how many are actually leaving the house in your house?
So, yes. So I have 4 that are at a private Christian school, 3 that are doing a homeschool hybrid. My 2-year-old goes to preschool 3 days a week because I also work part-time. And then my 18-year-old works full-time as a plumber.
You know, I have friends who have large families, and this all sounds like good heavens. This is awful. Actually, it's not. I've got friends early when we lived in Hull, Massachusetts. People used to get angry at me and say, "You go to Hull." But there was a couple who, where she came from a family of 13 kids. And I said, that must have been awful. And she said, it was the most wonderful thing you can possibly experience.
Mm-hmm.
So we do feel sorry for you. I mean, that goes without saying. But as a matter of fact, you live a life of joy that very few people can experience.
Yeah, and again, just we have a quad squad, so I feel like we weren't even really trying. But but when it's the Manic stuff, it's hard to compare to anything. It's just an unbelievable blessing. You know, a lot of right now when this is airing, a lot of families are going to have a big anxiety bomb called back to school, where it's just totally hitting. And I was just curious, you know, from a practical point of view, I like what you said earlier about kind of centering yourself at the beginning of the day. But when, you know, stuff goes sideways during the day, like practically speaking, how do you incorporate this stuff from the book? What do you do when you need to be somewhere and now somebody's throwing up on the cat or whatever, you know, domestic craziness happened that day?
Yes. Well, when I was first exposed to the humility book by Andrew Murray, I listened to the audiobook on replay all the time because I needed to continually remind myself that going lower was the way to wholeness and peace. And the beautiful thing is that when we go lower and we humble ourselves before God and the circumstances He's allowed to be around us, it's not just a principle you're embracing. Jesus goes lower. And that's what Andrew Murray talks about in his book, just that the God of the universe would become a human and endure all the nitty-gritty human things and then be defamed and die a gruesome death. All of that led to the darkness of a tomb and a grave. And what I found myself telling myself is like, this is an opportunity for you to die, Kimberly, to yourself. Die to your agenda, your time schedule, what you want your house to look like, the way you want your kids to behave. This is an opportunity to go lower and join Jesus in that path. And you get intimacy with Him. It's a person behind the principle of humility. There's a person there. And that intimacy is the treasure that you glean from all the manic stuff going on outside of you and even within you.
I found that God really has no compunction about bringing us to the end of ourselves. Like He's really cool with it, whether you've got 12 kids or 4 kids or 0 kids or whatever. And He's like, yeah, no, I'm going to bring you to where you don't have enough on your own. And I feel like the only conclusion would be either A, He's a sadist, or B, there's a purpose behind it. And my experience leads towards the latter, that it's not meaningless. It's not forced Him to be cruel. He has something for us if we will engage Him on that level.
Exactly. And what I do talk about in the book that isn't the popular thing to talk about is the role of pride and the role of the self-life. And when I say self-life, it's like, me, I will be God, I will be in control, me. And when you have this many kids, there's so many opportunities for it to not be about you. And I can either fight against that and then be mad at everyone because they're not letting me have my way, or I can embrace that and say, oh Lord, another opportunity for the self-life of Kimberly to die so that the resurrected Christ life can be manifested in me and through me.
Of course, before you do that, you can cuss and spit. And and listen, the great thing about the gospel is that when you cuss and spit, before you realize what God is doing, you're forgiven, even before you cuss and spit. So forgiveness plays a part in this too, doesn't it?
There is a chapter in the book called The Glory of the Wrecking Ball. And if you ever want to feel better about your parenting, you should read that chapter because it is a very raw and honest confession of how hard and ugly things got. But again, it was bringing me to the end of myself. It was bringing me to humble myself before my children after really sinning against them. And the fact that we can love being part of a big family is the grace and mercy and forgiveness of Jesus manifested over and over and over again in our home.
Oh, man. Isn't that refreshing? Hey, guys, more refreshing on the other side of the break. Got to pay for this thing. It's a commercial break, but like Jesus, we're coming back. Thanks for being with us. We're hanging out with Kimberly Anne Iverson. You can keep up with her on Instagram. She may not respond. I asked her if she was teaching some of these principles. She said, well, I'm a little busy. But you can keep up with her on Instagram at Kimberly Iverson. I don't want to put you on the spot, Kimberly, but do you know the names of all your children? And just to be sure, would you tell us?
Yeah, so some of them would wonder if I do know their names properly, because it usually is like 4 names at once. But the lineup, and my oldest is 18, so the lineup is Daniel Josiah, Trinity, Katie Grace, Benjamin, Malachi, Judah, Gwendolyn, Joel, and Hope. And Hope is 2. And we've got 2 on the way, and one of them is baby Isaiah. We don't know the other one.
It's marvelous.
I didn't think you could do it. I'm quite impressed.
Wow.
Amazing. Kimberly, I'd be interested in you just commenting some on how you structured the book. That by itself is sort of a model for people of how they can approach kind of a devotional time and also in dealing with different issues. And maybe touch on a little background on Andrew Murray at the same time.
Yeah. So Andrew Murray was a 19th century pastor and evangelist. He's written a ton of small books, a lot about the intimacy with Christ and humility and prayer. I think it's a good idea to listen to dead guys because their messages have stood the test of time. And in terms of the structure of the book, I give an intro and set the stage. Then I talk about the different portions of his book because it's written in older English. It's a little hard to understand. And then it's a pulsing of that into the different spheres of our lives. First of all, as us as creations of his, and then us as redeemed sinners, and then us as just one piece in a set of circumstances. Like that chapter's titled "A Pain in the Neck: Humility in Our Circumstances," and then humility as it relates to people, and that one's entitled "You're Getting on My Nerves." And then there's the inner critic part too, where who's going to be God of what's going on inside of your mind? Is it God's truth, or is it the inner critic that starts to reign and rule there?
Mm-hmm. And you, and along with that, I mean, as you go through the book, you even use different fonts. You have something from Andrew Murray, you have some of your own thoughts and so forth. Talk a little about that.
Yes, so I wanted to differentiate it because it's very much like how the book transpired being written. So I had my journaling in the composition book. I had the underlined parts of Andrew Murray's quotes. I had scripture verses that I had written out on index cards that I would carry around with me to help get my mind in a good space when things were going crazy and I was rushing from here to there. And then there's a lot of there's italicized parts of me asking questions, because it's really, how does the principle of humility really affect anxiety and stress and worry in the middle of real life situations? And there's a lot of not pretty real life situations documented in the book. And
like the wrecking ball chapter.
yes. And so it breaks it up so that people can know kind of the discourse that was going on. It's not just like, here's my seminary paper on humility. This is humility as it's pulsed into the nitty gritty.
You, one of the things, and I don't think we've referenced it on air, but this affects people emotionally, but it has a physiological manifestation too, doesn't it?
Yes, and that's what got me on the kick of this. I was listening to the Andrew Murray book, just realizing how much I was just a tiny speck in God's creation. It felt like the physical drain of all this pinball energy in me just drained out through my body. And it was the first time I'd experienced like true rest within my body in months and months. And so after that, I was like, this is a doorway, whatever he's talking about. And this principle is a doorway into experiencing rest, no matter where I am or what I'm doing.
That's so good. And we sometimes make a dichotomy between the emotions and the body, but they're connected. And they're connected biblically, and they're connected in reality. You got to get this book. Don't ever talk to anybody about a problem unless they know it's a problem. Don't ever talk to anybody about anything's bad unless they know it's bad. And Kimberly's been there, and she's done that. And as you read through the book, the first thing that's going to hit you is that this is an honest lady, and Diogenes can blow out his lamp and go home. The name of the book is Memoir for the Manic Years, Discovering Humility as an Antidote to Anxiety. That's counterintuitive, but it's wise, and it's deep, and it's profound. Listen, we're going to do more of this, so don't touch your dial or your screen. Just stay there and wait, and you will be glad you did. Kimberly Anne Iverson. And by the way, I made a mistake. It was the only one I've ever made. Well, there was one other when I thought I made a mistake. If you want to go to Instagram, you can, and find Kimberly at Kimberly A. Iverson. Write that down and draw a line through what you wrote there.
We don't know where that goes.
The first time.
Kimberly, you had just kind of glanced on something earlier that I had found as a parent only kind of recently. I know every mom and dad wants to set a good example and make good choices with their kids, but real life is they see the ups and downs and the goods and uglies and everything. And you brought in humility with that, and the humility where you're like, hey, can we just talk about what just happened or what happened this morning? I totally messed that up, and I'm sorry, and here's what I learned, and here's where it's such an opportunity that we miss out on if we just try to glaze past it or act like that didn't happen. Would you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, when you've messed up as bad as I have, you have to apologize. But it also sets the tone for everyone else in the family if they're used to hearing mom or dad, explode, lose it, but then say, I am so sorry. That was not Jesus in me. and it sets the pace for them to be able to humble themselves and apologize to the people they mess up against. And it sets an atmosphere where you don't always have to be right. You just have to be honest. And so I see it trickling down to my children too.
That's a source of great freedom too, isn't it? I mean, it is hard to pretend. It really is. And after a while, it'll kill you. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that's why the Lord gave me so many kids, because I feel like I might have been able to pretend for like 2 kids worth of chaos, but he just kept adding them, and there was no pretending anymore. You just get the raw, ugly, I'm so out of control, everything's out of control, and now I'm going to yell at you all.
So this is really kind of a compliment from God. It's like, gosh, she can handle, she can fake it with a few. Let's add a few more. See where.
The context of where Kimberly lives and ministers is, of course, her family, and that's a priority, and it shows. And the things that she's learning from Murray, and from God through Murray, and in her own thoughts are incredible. But tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing and how people can check on it.
Yeah, well, we started our inner city ministry 20 years ago on the streets of Newark, New Jersey. I was pregnant with our first when we moved in. And boy, talk about deaths to self. And also talk about losing your religion. Because when I was a Christian in college, leading Bible studies in a nice, calm coffee shop versus people are knocking on my door all the time, needing something from me, you cannot fake it then. And I really had to lose a lot of that self-righteousness and be so desperate for Jesus. Literally, like, I cannot keep loving these people. They're taking every last ounce of me. Because, when you're in poverty, you're surrounded by poverty. Everyone around you needs something from you.
Yeah.
So that's where we started. Now we're in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm actually in the youth center that Danny built. We minister with a lot of people that are living in extended stay hotels at the moment. But when I wrote the book, we moved in, we were like one of the only white families of an under-resourced area of Atlanta. And we were the place to be. So I had people all the time coming by our house, either to play with my kids or needing a meal, or Danny was bringing them home. And we were letting people live with us oftentimes that were in transition or didn't have a place to go. So it was very stressful, but also Jesus hung out with poor people, and Jesus went to the margins. And really, that's where we find Jesus a lot. Like, that's what's kept us in this ministry for 20 years. Jesus shows up amongst poor people.
What's the name of your ministry, and how can people help support you?
Yeah, so it's called Restore Life. The website is restorelife.net. There's a giving page there. You can find out more about it. We just finished up our summer camps and our summer program, and are switching gears for the youth mentorship with the studios that my husband's built. And we've got young men now that were 9 and 10 that used to be at our house all the time. Those are the ones that are staying with us now as they transition in and out of college, which is huge. Like, what God has done in these boys that used to drive me nuts. I'm like, just leave my house already. Now they've become like sons to us, and they've become so on fire for the Lord that they're now influencing my own children that are like, yeah, we've heard this a bunch of times. So anyways, that's our ministry, or God's ministry that he allows us to be part of.
Oh man, that's so good. You ought to check it out, because this is effective and unbelievable. You ever wanted to say, I've had it and I'm going to leave?
Oh yeah. It's in the book. I tell that
I
story.
know.
Yeah, that's the wrecking ball story. Yeah. No, there's a lot of times I want to quit, but God's a God of resurrections. And every time I quit to my own strength or power or ability to do it, he resurrects and fills us afresh with himself.
Do you you write a lot? Are your blogs on that website you gave us?
They are not. And I'm not as active on the blogs these days because I was working on the book actually, and all of my extra time was
Yeah.
spent on this. But the book is on Amazon, and there is a link to my blogs. So it's not like on the Restore Life, but there's a link that you can get to them.
Great. Do you you working on something now? Another book?
There's stuff in my brain, but not on paper yet.
If the kids
I'm
would
kind
just
of growing
leave you
2
alone,
children. Yes.
you could turn out another one. Kimberly, you are delight. You always have been. You're so real that this cynical old preacher may keep on doing this for a little bit longer just because of you. Thank you so much for taking time from an incredibly crazy schedule to spend it with us. Kimberly, you get 3 free sins. Use them very carefully and thoughtfully, okay? And give my love.
I already used them up.
and give
Sorry.
and give my love to your husband.
Your
Not so sweet husband. Memoir of the Manic Years. Get it and read it. This is a life-changing book. It'll go in directions you didn't expect. That's what life does. And God would give you peace because of it. She and her husband are both some of the freest people I've ever known and the most joyous. When you're around them, you laugh probably more than anything else. And the reason is what she said, because she is what you saw and you heard. And he is too. We're trying to make an impact for God, trying to make a difference in people, make our lives count, create our legacy. It's all about us, and it isn't about us at all. God really is big, and he was doing fine before we came along, and he's going to do fine long after we're gone. And that sounds like a drag. Sounds horrible. It sounds like that's awful. I mean, what's that going to do with your self-image? Let me tell you something. It's going to make you alive and free. And you can dance and sing for the first time in your life before a God who loves you more than you could possibly imagine, and who will continue to do that no matter where you go or what you do or who you hurt. Now that's good news, and it'll make you humble like me. I got the badge for being the most humble person in our church, and they took it away when I wore it. Who's going to be on next week, Kathy?
Well, it's a good thing you gave me a little extra time this week, because this may be the longest title of a book that we've ever had, but I think it's going to be a great interview. Next week, our guest is Justin Brierley, who I believe is a Brit. Always have fun when they come.
They talk funny, but...
Anyway,
yeah.
The title of the book is The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God, Why New Atheism Grew Old and Secular Thinkers Are Considering Christianity Again.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
Is
not
that-
going to fit on a
Is
book.
that
Should
just,
I
is that
repeat
just
that?
one book cover?
Why new atheism
Chapter
grew
2.
old and secular thinkers are considering Christianity again. This could be a really good hour.
By the way, in case you haven't heard recently, the nuns have quit growing. Those are the ones who say none of the above. And that group, and everybody was rejoicing that they're growing, we're finally getting sophisticated and cool. Forget it. It's not happening anymore. They're dying out because thou hast created us for thyself, and there's restlessness without you. Guys, we're out of here. We're coming back next week, same time, same place. Hope you join us. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't, and that gives you a wide berth.
Isn't that a great title?
It's not going to fit on a ball cap.
It is. It's a great title.
There was a day when all books and pamphlets had those kind of titles.
Yeah. And each chapter.
Yeah, and each chapter was long.